Hi guys, welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to be building out a web application that reviews a portfolio website. So it is going to be using AI to provide feedback based on the design of that portfolio website. Now I'm going to show you the final product of this website. But before we do that, I want to thank Voiceflow for sponsoring this video. Voiceflow is a platform that allows you to build AI agents to perform various tasks. And we are going to be using Voiceflow in this video to build out an AI agent that takes in a screenshot of a portfolio website and generates feedback based on the design of that website. But that is just one use case. You can use Voiceflow for a lot of things. For example, customer support, or even just automating tasks, and so much more. So to find out more about Voiceflow, go to voiceflow.com or click the link in the description below. And make sure you create an account so you can follow along with this video. And having that said, let me show you the final product of this project. Now, all you just need to do is to have the URL of the portfolio website. So right here, I have this portfolio website that I'm using, and it is a very nice portfolio website with a simplistic and nice design. And all you just need to do is to have the URL for this, and this is the URL. So just copy that and then paste it into this input bar right here and click on review. So what this is going to do is that it is going to take a full screenshot of that whole website, so a full screenshot of that page, and it is going to submit that screenshot into the AI agent that we're going to build with Voiceflow, and then we're going to build out that AI agent to analyze and provide feedback based on the design of that website. And if you come back here, you can see that that was done successfully. So this is how it's going to look like. This is the feedback of the portfolio. So it gives us the good aspects, it gives us the areas for improvement, and it also gives us like a little summary. So as you can see, it's a quite detailed review or quite detailed feedback, and it also shows us the full screenshot of that website. And one more feature that I added is to allow a user to rate the feedback. So if they think this feedback was good, they could click on great, and it's going to say thanks for rating. And all of this is also going to be saved into a database. And if they don't like it, they could also click on poor. So this is what we are going to be building, and I really hope you're excited. Without wasting any time, let's get straight into it. The first thing I'm going to do is to create a new Django project. So we're going to be using Django in this video, and first of all, you need to make sure that you have Django installed. To do this, just type in pip3. So you need to open up your terminal, and if you're on Windows, you can open up your command prompt. Type in pip3 install Django. Now, it says requirements already satisfied for me. That's because I already have Django installed. But if you don't have it installed, it should go ahead and do that for you. I'm just going to clear this up. And now I'm going to navigate into the folder where I want to create this project. So I'm going to navigate into my documents. And in there, I'm going to navigate into the projects folder. And in there, I created a folder called Portfolio Review. So this should be an empty folder. But actually, it's not an empty folder. So I have a folder called backend, and I have one for the template. So this template contains the index, the HTML file basically. So a file titled index.html, and that's what we're going to be using for this project. But because we are using Django, I'm going to cd into backend, and now this should be an empty file. And now I'm going to create a new Django project. I'm going to say Django-admin start project, and I'm just going to name it portfolio review. So this same thing, I'm going to copy and paste it. Now if I click on ls, I should see that we have portfolio review right here. I'm going to navigate into that folder. So cd portfolio review. If I click ls, now I have the Django project. The next thing I'm going to do is to create a Django app. So I'm going to say Django admin start app, and I'm just going to say review. Now if I press ls, you can now see that I have a new app called review. If I press 3, this is just going to show me every single file and folder in this particular folder. So we have a file called manage.py. We have another folder called portfolio review, which is the folder where all the settings or all the configuration related to the whole project is done. And now we have a new folder called review. Now all the files here are related to this review app that we created, and we're going to work with that in a bit. So now that we have this done, I'm going to come into Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to open this project up in here. So to do that, I'm just going to come here click on open folder, and I'm going to navigate in there. So I'm actually in this particular folder here, and I'm just going to click on backend, and I'm going to click portfolio review, and I'm going to click on open. Now this is going to open this up for me. I'm going to cancel this, cancel all of this. Now that we have all of this, the next thing to do is to just set up the URL mapping. So first of all, I'm going to open up a new terminal right here. I'm going to say Python free manage.py run server. Now what this command does is that it runs this particular project that we just created for us on the web, so we could see it and make sure everything is done successfully. So what I did was to just copy this particular development server, and I'm going to paste it in here and click on enter. Boom. Now you can see that everything works successfully. So Django says it's successfully seen this, and all the installation works successfully. I'm going to come back in here. I'm just going to minimize that tab. And now what I'm going to do is to make sure that when a user logs in, or when a user comes to our application, this is not what they see. So they need to see a particular HTML file, a particular template. For us to do this, I'm going to click on create folder, templates, and in here I'm going to drag a particular index.html file. So I'm just going to drag that actually from the separate screen. So if I just drag this into this particular place, just like this. Now I'm just gonna minimize this and show you what this is. So as you can see, this is an HTML file, and you're gonna see it just has basic styling and just basic forms that we need to bring this to life, and you're gonna see how this looks like when we configure it on here. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna quit this, and I'm gonna come into portfolio review. I'm gonna go into settings. Now in here, I'm gonna scroll all the way to where we see templates, and under theirs, I'm gonna say base there, comma, template. Now what this is doing is that it's basically saying that whenever a user tries to come or tries to look for a template file, such as an HTML file, it needs to go into the root directory or the base directory, and this is the base directory right here, this directory, and then go into the template folder, then into the templates folder. So then it can look for that HTML file. I'm just going to save this. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to scroll up and look for a list called installed apps. And in here, I'm going to add the review app that we just created as an app. So I'm going to quit that. And now what I'm just going to do is to come under the review app, and I'm actually going to create a new file called urls.py. Now this file is where we're going to configure all the URLs for our application. So to do this, I'm going to say if I have to import something from Django.urls called path. So this path is used to basically specify or configure every single URL path on our application or on our project. And ignore this yellow underlining right here. It's just like a code editor issue. There is no problem. As long as you have Django installed, you should be fine. So what I'm going to do is to then come in here and create a new list called URL patterns. And I'm going to say path, and I'm going to have a blank quote. So if I have blank quote, this means I'm configuring this URL for my own page. I'm going to say views.index. I'm going to explain that in a bit, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm just naming this URL index. I'm going to have a comma right here. So first of all, these views is basically, we're basically importing a function called index from views.py file. So this views.py file is this views right here in the same folder as urls.py. And in there, it's going to go in there and look for a function called index. So we're going to come in here and say function index. Gonna have to take a request, and for now let's just pass. And right here in URLs, it still gives us an error, but this is because we are not importing views. So I'm gonna say from the current directory import views. Now this should solve that. I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna come in here, and this is already saved, but I'm not gonna leave this like this. So what I want to do is when a user tries to come into the home page, I want to take them to this index.html template. So I want to load or render that template. To do this, I'll say, I'm gonna have to say return, and I'm gonna say render. It's gonna take a request, and then the name of the HTML template, index.html. Now this works, but if I come back in here and hit refresh, it still shows me this. It doesn't work completely. Now this is because everything we just configured was under the app folder and not under the projects folder. So the app is just a subset of the entire project. Once we configure something on the app, we have to come into the project and update it or tell it that this is what we did in the app. So now I just came into portfolio review, which is a project folder, and in there is actually another urls.py file. And what I'm going to do is to come here and import something called include. And now I'm going to create path, a new URL, and I'm going to say include. I'm also going to explain what this does. Review.urls. Now what this is saying is that we're basically creating a new URL for the home page. Remember I said whenever I have blank code, this is for the home page. So it's saying include review.urls. So what this is saying is that when a user tries to come into the home page, go into the review app and go into the urls.py folder. Now it's going to come in here and it's going to into reviews app and it's going to come into urls.py. Then what it's going to do is that it's going to look for a URL path that correlates with this, which is blank URL. So it's going to come in and look for a blank URL, and whatever is being done here is what is going to happen. So once it finds that blank URL, it's going to go into views and look for a function called index, and this is views and this is the function called index. And because we are rendering this template, that is what is going to be rendered. Now if I come back in here and hit refresh, you can now see that this works perfectly fine. So it says AI website review and enter a website domain. So this is specifically for portfolio sites. I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to go into index.html. And I'm just going to adjust that. So let me just collapse this AI portfolio review and enter your portfolio domain. I can save this and quit. And come back in here and hit refresh. We can see those changes. Good. Now that we have this done, the next thing that we can do is to just go straight into setting up our models. Now, because we are going to be creating, so what we're doing is, a user is going to put in particular domain. When they click on review, we're going to have to take a screenshot of that old domain. We're going to have to then send that screenshot to the OpenAI vision using Voiceflow. We're going to have to get a response. We're going to have to allow a user to then rate that response if they think the feedback was a good feedback or bad feedback. And we are going to have to save all of this information into a database. And because we're going to save all of this into a database, we need to create a model for that now. And let's kind of break down what we need. So as I said, we're going to need the screenshot, we're going to need the domain, which is the URL of that particular portfolio, and we're going to need the feedback. And after that, we're going to need the rating. So if the user did rate it, they're going to rate it either great or poor. So if the feedback or the portfolio review was great or poor, so we're going to also need a field for that to store that information. Now to do this, we're going to come into the review folder and we're going to come into models.py app. Now this is where we create database in Django. So we have something called ORM, which stands for Object Relational Mapper. In content, in summary, it just allows you to create database tables with Python objects. So rather than writing traditional SQL code, what you can just do is we're going to create database tables where the name of the class stands for the name of the table and every single attribute in that class stands for the fields in that table. Now let's do that. So I'm just going to say class review models.model. This is how we create a new model in Django. So this is the name of that model and we have to use models.model. And now we're going to have, let's say, let me give you an ID, and let me just say models.auto field. So let's give it an auto field, and let's make this the primary key. Let me make sure this is gone. So we say primary key equals true. So this stands for the ID. And for the domain, we're going to say site underscore URL. So let's give you a character field, models.character field. And the only thing we need to specify really is just the max length. Let me make sure you can see that. Max underscore length equals, let's say 10,000, because some domains are quite long unnecessarily. Now the next thing is the URL of the screenshot. So when we take a screenshot, we're going to have to upload that screenshot to a particular file hosting or image hosting platform. And for that, we're going to be using Cloudinary. So once we do that, Cloudinary is going to then send us back a response, which is the URL of that screenshot that has been hosted. And we're going to store that in here. And the field we're going to store that in is going to be called site image URL. Once again, this is going to be a character field. We can use other fields for this, but I just really prefer character field. So we could say max length. Let's also give it 10,000. And the feedback is quite a lot of words. So we're going to use character field, but this time around, let's give it a max length of something like 100,000. Actually, I think this should be fine. 1 million. That is nice. And let's say default equals none. And the reason why I'm adding this, because when we are testing this database to see if it works, or we are just running any type of test, we want to be able to leave this blank for now. I'm just going to say default can be none, and it can have null as true. So make sure you can see that like this, and good. Now the last field we need is the field to store the user rating. So when a user rated or tries to give to, because there will be something like a thumbs up button and a thumbs down button. Once the user click on that thumbs up, we want to save it there as great. The user said this was a great review. But if they click on thumbs down, we want to save it here as poor. The user said this was quite a poor review. So that means we want to have two choices. So let me just create a new tuple, and I'm going to name it great, poor, choices, something like this. And in here, I'm going to have another tuple, and I'm going to say great. This stands for great, poor. This stands for poor, just like this. Now we've created choices, so that means there are only two choices available that can be saved to this particular field, and the field is user underscore rating. But this is also going to be a character field, but the difference is, so say models dot character field. The difference is that it has some requirements, and the first requirement is that the max length can only be 5. And that is because the maximum length is great. So great is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Poor is 4 words. So it can either be 4 or 5 characters. And that's why we just put in 5. And the choices, let me make sure you can see that once again. Choices should be equals to this. So that means you can only save from this. And default, so once again, I'm going to use default as none. And this is just so that when we're testing, we can bypass actually putting a value for now. We can change this later if we want to. So null true, and let's say blank true also. Just like this. Now this should be good. I'm going to save this, and what I'm just going to do is to create a new terminal, and I'm going to say python 3 manage.py make migrations. So this is gonna kind of save those changes and tell you the changes that you've made. So we created a new model called review, but now we actually want to migrate those changes into our database. So we do that by saying python 3 manage.py migrate. Good, now that is done. There's a lot of ways you can actually see your database, but you can create an admin panel and then see your database. We're going to do that later, but for now we're using SQLite, and I have a particular extension that allows me to just see the database values. So before I even show you this, let me show you the extension. I'm going to come into extensions and I'm going to say SQLite. So this is it right here, SQLite viewer. Let me just show you. You can go ahead and download this or install this extension so you can be able to easily see your SQLite database. So now I'm going to come back in here and I'm just going to click on that. And I'm actually just going to reduce this and expand this a little bit. So this is everything that we migrated to this database right now. All of this up to auth user and also Django sessions. These are models, or these are models or database tables that comes with Django as default. But what we created was review. So we created let me explain why this is saved like this. This is because we created a new model called review under the review app, right? So the model we created was called review, and the app we created it under was also called review. So that's why I saved this as review. If the app was something like app, it would be app_review. Hope that makes sense. So I could click on this, and now I could first expand this. Now I can see all the details. ID is known as the primary key, site URL, site image URL, feedback, and user rating. And if I come here, I can also see all of that right here. So that has been done. We've successfully created that particular Django model, or also known as a database. The next thing that we're going to do now is to be able to take the screenshot of a particular portfolio website. So as I said earlier in this video, the breakdown of this, or the processes that is going to go on when a user put in a link. So let's say they put in the link to their portfolio site, and that link is like, let's say something like tommy.com, something like this. And they click on review. We're going to send that particular domain to the backend, in this case to this particular views.py file. But what I want to do now is to create a function that is then going to take a full screenshot of that whole page. So it's going to be able to go to that page or go to that portfolio website and take a full screenshot. And all of this should be done like under the radar, like without opening up a browser or anything. It should just be done on the website. So for us to do this, we're gonna use something called a Chrome web driver. So I'm gonna show you how to access that, how to download that, and all of that. So what this does is that it basically, when we have a Chrome web driver, it allows us to simulate a Chrome browser. So when a user goes to or puts in the link, as we said, what is going to happen is that in our backend, we're going to kind of open up like a model of a Chrome browser, and then go to that particular portfolio website and take a full screenshot of it. But this is not going to be shown to the user. Like when the user is visiting the web page, and it's not like another tab is going to open and then it's then going to take the screenshot. This is just going to be done on the back end, like on the server basically, which is what we want. So before we move on, there are two things we need. So once we take a screenshot of the page, we want to be able to upload that screenshot to an image hosting service where we can then get the link of that image so that we can later save it in our database, right? So for us to do this, we need two things. The first thing is the Chrome driver, the Chrome web driver, and the second thing is an image hosting platform. And for that, the perfect solution I found was Cloudinary. It was very easy, very seamless to set up, and I'm going to show you that right now. So first of all, as I said, you need to download a Chrome driver. So this is the link you need to go to get a Chrome driver for your specific Chrome version. I'm going to leave this link in the description below. So as you can see, this is the link, and what you just need to do is to come down and look for the version for your current Chrome browser. And once you find the version, just click on it, and like this, it says this supports Chrome version 1.13. So you can click on it. If yours is 114, you can click on this. So it has a lot for every single Chrome version basically. And once you click on one, let's say I click on this, it's going to open up a new tab, and you can download it for whatever system you're on. If you're on a Linux, if you're on a Mac, or Windows. So just click on it, it's going to download that. So once that is done, the next thing you need to do is to go into Cloudinary. So just go to cloudinary.com. Once again, I'm going to have this Chrome driver link in the description below, and for Cloudinary, just go to cloudinary.com and sign up. So once you just sign up, it's going to bring you to this page, and then we're going to use this later in this video when we're actually hosting that screenshot image on this Cloudinary platform. So make sure you have an account here. Then once that is done, let's go back. So what we're going to do now is to come back into VS Code. I'm actually going to write a new function. So right here, I'm just going to have a new function, and I'm going to name this function, let me say, take screenshot. And it's going to take a parameter called URL. So this is the URL of the portfolio website. I want to take a screenshot of that URL. So the first thing we want to do is to set the WebDriver options and initialize the browser. So to do this, we're going to say options equals WebDriver dot. So we're going to say dot Chrome options, like this, options. And what this does is we're setting up an options by basically just saying we're going to give it some arguments or some parameters for this particular query, and I'm going to explain that more in detail right now. But before we can do this, we're going to use a particular Python library called Selenium. So we're going to say from Selenium import WebDriver. If you don't know what Selenium is, it's a very, very popular Python library, mainly used for web scraping and like automations and stuff like that. So we're going to be using that in this particular project. And before this can work, you need to make sure you have this installed. So once again, I said ignore this yellow underlinings. It's just a code editor thing. What you just need to do is come here and make sure you have Selenium installed. So say pip3 install Selenium. And I already have that installed, so it says requirement already satisfied. But for you, you should go ahead and install that. Once you have it installed, say from Selenium import WebDriver. And since you have WebDriver imported, now we can say options.add argument. And now we want to say no, we want to say headless. Now what this does is when we try to create a new instance of Chrome, it doesn't open up that browser for us. It does all of that like under the radar in the backend. And we're gonna add some other argument dot add. So this has to be argument and dot add argument, no sandbox, and options dot add argument, disable dev and shm usage. So all of this is just saying we just want to create a very, very, very basic web page just to take a screenshot. Now we can say browser equals to, now using everything we've initialized, WebDriver.Chrome options equals options. Now the reason why I did this like this, with the way we've done it right now, once you install the Chrome WebDriver that I talked about, this, once you install it, you don't specifically need to like you don't need to come here and specify the link or the path to that particular, to where that Chrome driver is installed. I hope that makes sense. So what this does is automatically just uses the Chrome browser that is on your machine, basically. That is what I just wanted to explain, because there are other ways you can do this, but other ways needs you to specifically put in the path to where that particular Chrome driver is installed. You don't really need to understand all of that, but you just need to know that this automatically finds the Chrome browser on your machine. So now we can navigate to that particular URL by saying browser.get then URL, which is this URL right here. And the next thing we want to do is, because we want to take a full screenshot. So if I just take a normal screenshot right now, what it's going to do is that it's going to open up Chrome, and then, for example, this is the, so I'm going to go into the portfolio website that I'm going to be using. This right here is the portfolio website. So it comes in a bit muffy, I think, because I'm on Safari. I'm going to open that up on Chrome. So this right here is the portfolio website. Okay, good. It looks nice now. If I just take a screenshot, it's just only going to take a screenshot of this area. It's not going to take the whole page, but we need to take a screenshot of the whole page before we can give a detailed review and feedback of that website. So that is why what I need to do is to first get, so I'm first going to get the full height of that page. Then I'm going to resize the window to the full height of that page. So now to do that, I'm going to say browser dot first, before I set the window size, I need to get the total height. So I'll say total height equals browser dot execute script, and this script is basically a JavaScript script, and what it's just going to do is it's going to return document dot body dot parent node dot scroll height, like this. So this code, if you run this code on any website with JavaScript, it's going to return you the height of that particular page. So that's what we're just using. So document dot body dot parent node dot scroll height. So it's going to scroll through and then return you with the height. So now we can now resize that browser to adjust to the height. So we'll now say browser dot set underscore window underscore size. So the width, we can just leave the width like this, and then the height should be total height. Good. Now we can take a screenshot. Now we're going to say screenshot is equals to browser dot get screenshot as PNG. Now this is going to take a screenshot of that whole page and save it as a PNG file. Now we can quit the browser. So we're going to say browser.quit, just like this. So this is exactly how we do it. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to sanitize the URL. That's what I call it. Because when we host this on Cloudinary, I want it to have a specific name, and the name I want it to have is basically the URL of that web page. But once again, let me just have, this is the URL of the web page, like this. I can't really save a URL with this. So when Cloudinary returns the image, it's going to be something like res.cloudinary.com / image, then / our image.png, something like this. But what I want to do is I want to return the name of this .png so I can easily identify every single PNG files. Like this. This is what I want to save it as. But as you know, this is not possible in a URL. I can't have two HTTPS with / and all of this. So what I want to do is I want to remove any HTTPS, and then where we have let's see. So anywhere that we have something like dot, I want to change it to an underscore. And if we have something like a /, I also want to change it to an underscore, something like this, all of this. So something like this. It could be an underscore, it could be an hyphen, it doesn't really matter. So I want it to look something like this, so it doesn't, and something like this. Now this can make sense. This can be better as a web page, as a web URL. Now that's what I need to do. So what I'm going to do is to then create something called sanitized underscore URL equals to URL dot replace. So if there is an HTTP, first let's start with HTTP colon 2 slashes. I want to replace that with blank. So I want to get rid of it. Let's add another one, dot replace. If there is an HTTPS, I want to replace it with blank. Let's add another one, dot replace. If there is, let's see, a slash, just a slash on its own, then I want to replace it with an underscore. Let's add one more, dot replace. If there is a colon on its own, then let's put this in quotes, colon, then I want to replace it with an underscore. So this is basically what I want to do. And now if I return this particular sanitized URL, it's going to give me a clean version of that URL, right? So this is what I basically want to do. We can test this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually open up right here. I'm going to open up Python 3, so a Python shell, just to test this out. So let's say we have URL as a variable, and let's say it's equals to that particular portfolio website that I said I'm going to use for testing. So I'm just going to paste that in here like this, just like this. And now I'm going to use this sanitized URL like this. And now let me print sanitized underscore URL. Can you see what it gives us now? So it gives us all of this, but then there's no HTTPS, there's no slashes. So this can be added as the end of a URL. So now I can just cut out of this and come back. So now that we are able to take a screenshot of that particular web page or that portfolio page, what we want to do is to now be able to upload that screenshot or host that screenshot directly to Cloudinary. Now let me show you how to do that. It's quite easy and straightforward. So I'm going to come in here and come back to Chrome, and right here, as I said earlier, go to cloudinary.com, create an account, and when you've been brought to this dashboard, you're going to see, so I'm just going to increase this a little bit and close that. So they support obviously a lot of languages and frameworks, but since we're using Python, we're just going to come to Python, and what you just need to do is to install Cloudinary. So run pip install Cloudinary, but if you're on a Mac, then run pip3 install Cloudinary. So I already have it installed. That's why it says requirements already satisfied. Once you have that done, the next thing you need to do is to copy this and come back in here and import Cloudinary. Once you've done that, the next thing is to copy all of this. So this automatically, so I'm just going to copy this. This automatically uses your API key and API secret. You can't really use mine because I'm going to disable this after this video is live. But once you create an account, yours is automatically going to be there. So you're just going to come back in here, copy this. So we don't need this again. So once you have that pasted, that is good. You've set up, you've configured Cloudinary. Now we can use it. Now for us to now actually use this, what we need to do is to come back in here, and right here there is something called Cloudinary.uploader. So first let's copy Cloudinary.uploader. Let's paste that in there. So I'm gonna have to get rid of this, and the next thing that I'm gonna do is right here after sanitized URL, I'm gonna then upload that particular page, that particular screenshot to Cloudinary. So I'm using this syntax right here, but I'm going to add more parameters and I'm going to explain them. So now let's upload it. So we're going to say upload response, just creating a new variable. It's going to be equals to Cloudinary.uploader.upload, open brackets, and what we want to upload is this screenshot. So remember, this was the image. So browser.get screenshot as PNG. This was the particular image. So that's what we want to upload, and that's the first thing argument you need to put in there. And we want to put it in a folder called screenshots. So this I don't think is necessarily so if I come here, yeah, it's not required, but if you just want to, you know, arrange or organize everything better, it's better to just put it in a folder. So then I know that this project is being hosted on a folder on my Cloudinary named screenshots. You can name that anything you want. And now I'm gonna say public ID. Now what this public ID is so if I just give Cloudinary this particular screenshot without adding a public ID, it's gonna generate random name for that particular PNG file or that particular image. But if I add a public ID, I'm gonna give it the exact name that I want, and that name is gonna be, so it's gonna be this sanitized URL. So let's say F. I'm gonna say sanitized URL just like this, then .png just like this. So we're using the sanitized URL. And resource type is an image. So this should do the work. And once this has been uploaded, what we now want to do is to return the URL. So return upload response. So if I return upload response, let's actually try this out. So how do we try this out? What we can do is we can call this. So let's call this in here. So I'm just going to call this take screenshot. I'm just going to call it here just for test. And instead of this URL, the URL I'm going to use is the one that I want to use, which is this. And then I could save. Now let's test this out. Before we test it out, let's just make sure everything is good. So right here we have options, we have the argument. Oh, right here we actually have a typographical error. This should be just one U. And let's keep going. So yeah, right here we're getting the height, and then we're setting the height, taking the screenshot, then quitting the browser, cleaning up the URL, uploading to Cloudinary, and returning that response. But let's actually also print the response. So right here, if you know Python functions, once we return that response, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to print that out for us, except we come here and say print. But what we can just do is to print this upload response also, so we can see the response right here in our terminal. So now I'm going to come in here, I'm going to come into Safari, I'm going to hit refresh, and that should basically do that for us. And right in here we should see the response, and the response should be in like a dictionary format where we're going to see all the details. Good. So right here, as you can see, this is the response. So it has the asset ID, you know, the public ID that we configured, every single thing. And what we need is the URL. So right here we're looking for this key called URL, and we're going to take the value of that key. Just going to copy that, and now let's come in here, paste it. Good. So as you can see, this is a full screenshot of that whole portfolio. I'm just zooming in right here. So as you can see, I could just zoom in, and it's a very very clear photo. As you can see, the more we zoom in, the more you see that everything is clear. So that is a full screenshot. We've uploaded that to Cloudinary, and that works successfully. But one thing I want to do, instead of returning the whole upload response, I'm just going to return the URL of that particular screenshot. So to do that, it's very easy. I could remove this now, or I could just comment it out. And right here, I'm just going to use the URL key and do that. So that solves the problem. Now we are able to successfully take the screenshot of a particular portfolio, and we have the URL. Now that we've successfully been able to get the screenshot of the portfolio website, the next thing that we're going to do is to take that image, then pass it on to OpenAI Vision and ask it some prompt, and then get some response back. So to do all of these processes, we're going to use Voiceflow. Voiceflow is a platform that basically allows you to deploy AI agents for various conversational AI applications without coding. So we're going to use Voiceflow to basically simplify all of this process, and you're going to see it visually. So Voiceflow, as you can see right here, is mainly used for building AI agents. So what we're going to do is just one use case. There's a lot of use cases that you can use Voiceflow for. And for example, you could have an e-commerce website and you want to have a support agent in there. You could use Voiceflow to basically create that support agent and give it all of the data about your e-commerce website, all of the information. And you could build an agent that will basically help users resolve issues. So this is just one use case. Once again, there's so many use cases you can see. There will be a link in the description below that you can use to access Voiceflow. So just sign up and so we can get started. So if you scroll down, you're going to see exactly what this platform is about. As you can see, you don't really need to do the coding. Of course, if you want to code, you can also code in there, but it's basically drag and drop. You can, create processes, create different flows, and create your own agent with just drag and drop. So right here, it's just all the information about the website. So once you have created an account, it's going to bring you to this dashboard. So for now, you should just have only one assistant right here. So what we're going to be doing is we're creating an assistant. So I have two, which is Vision, which I was practicing on earlier, and this is the default one that comes when you create Voiceflow. So what you just want to do is you could create a new assistant, or you could just even use the default one that comes with Voiceflow. So I'm just going to click on this, and that's going to open up this. So this is how it comes with Voiceflow. This is just going to go back here. So this is just like a basic, quick tutorial on how to use Voiceflow. And before we move on, I said we're going to be using OpenAI Vision. So this is OpenAI. We're going to be using their Vision API. We don't even really need to come into the OpenAI platform because we're going to be doing everything from here anyways. So what you're going to have to do is to basically create a new topic. And I'm going to name this topic review, something like this. Now, once you create this topic, the next thing is to create an intent. So an intent is basically what you want to do when something is triggered. So once we call this intent, what do we want to do next? So what I'm going to do now is to create a new intent. So I'm going to come in here and click on this button, add intent. So that's going to create a new intent, but we already have an intent created automatically. I'm just going to undo that. So right here, I'm just going to click on this and I'm just going to add a new intent and I'm going to name it review intent. Just like this, and I'm going to create new intent. So for the description, I'm going to leave that like that. And for this, I'm just going to say review. Like this. And then I'm going to create intent. So this is going to create that intent for me. Now I can click on this. And what I'm going to do is to basically make a flow. So what we want to do is once this intent is triggered, we want to receive the URL of that particular image or that particular screenshot, pass it on to the OpenAI Vision API, get some response, and then return that response to us. So that is how the flow is basically going to be. Now what I'm going to do is right here, I'm going to drag this out just like this, and I'm going to leave it. And it's going to ask me what I want to do next. So there's a lot of features. Look, we have an AI, we have, just basic conversational features like text, images and stuff, listen, logic, dev, and library. But what we're going to be doing is to use an API. So I'm going to go on to dev and API. So this API, we're sending it to the OpenAI Vision API, and we're going to be sending it using a post method, post, and then the URL we're sending it to is like this. So rather than us actually coding this out in Python or whatever we need, this basically allows us to do all of these processes by just filling up a few forms. Now the next thing we could do is to come into the headers. So I'm just going to write all the stuff that are required by the OpenAI API, and in here we're just going to have the content type, and the content type is just going to be application /JSON, just like this. And we're going to have another one, and the other one is authorization. So now for the authorization, so we need to make sure we have that right with a Z. For the authorization, we basically need to have an OpenAI API key, and we need to write it like this. So we're going to say bearer space. Then right here, we're going to put in the OpenAI API key. Now, for you to get that OpenAI API key, you need to come into OpenAI and click on login. So once you click on login, it's going to log you into your account. So I'm just going to log into my account. So right here, I'm just going to say I want to go into the API, not ChatGPT. And I'm going to come into API keys. And once you come into API keys, what you could do is, so right here, where I have some previous APIs, you could view those API right here. So these are all the API keys I had before. But what we want to do is to create a new secret key. The user API key have been replaced with project. We recommend using project-based APIs for more granular control over resources. So they usually have, so this is normal user API keys, but now they are recommending to use project API keys. So let's just create one. It doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna create, and I'm gonna copy that. Now I can click on done, and what I'm gonna do is to come back in here, right here. I'm gonna paste this in, just like this. And now what we need to put is the parameter right here. And for the parameter, no, actually we don't need to put any parameter because we already have all the details we need. We need the body. So for the body, we have three ways we can do this. We can either use a form data, URL encoded, or raw data. So what I'm going to use is raw data. And now this is just because I could copy this directly from the OpenAI API. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to come under API and documentation. Now this is going to take me to the OpenAI platform, and it's going to take me, if I come right here, I'm going to look for where we have vision. And right here, we can see this basically this API. This is how we can use it. And now for the body, these are all the details we need. So we need where we have the model, the messages, the roles, and everything. So what I did was I already have this written down, so we don't waste time writing everything. And I'm just gonna basically come back in here where we have this, and I'm gonna paste it. Once again, all of this is going to be available for you in the description below. Just go there, you'll see everything. Now, what we need to do is that right here, I'm going to explain all of this code that I wrote. So here we are using the GPT-4 vision model. And this is just, as I said, what is required from OpenAI API. And right here, we have the prompt. So we're going to pass it the URL to the image. And this is the prompt. Take a good look at the image. So I'm going to come back here. Take a good look at the image. It is a full screenshot of a portfolio website. Analyze the image I have provided you and give me a full detailed review of the portfolio website. Everything from the good and bad, and also things to improve on. Go into details. Yeah, so that's where it ends. Go into details. And the other thing we need to provide is the image URL. So if I swipe like this, this is the image URL. And then we need to specify that and give it the actual URL. But the value for that URL is last utterance. Now what this means is right here in our code, we're going to pass the URL onto onto Voiceflow, and we're going to pass it directly to this intent, and this whatever we pass in there is going to be replaced. It's going to be the value of last utterance. So last utterance basically just means what was the last thing the user input. What was the last user input, or what was the last thing the user provided? So in this case, whatever we provided when we are calling this particular intent is what is going to be the last utterance. And that is all we need. Right here, we're just having max tokens, which is 1000. Now this should be good. Now what we can just do is, since we're already taking the last utterance right here, I'm just going to click on send request to test this out. I'm going to get rid of this, and it's basically asking for the value right here. So what I'm going to do is to come in here, and I'm going to scroll up and open my terminal. Remember this image that we got? I'm going to copy that link, paste it in here, and hit generate. Now let's see, that should basically provide us with an answer. So this is not working, it's not providing us with an answer. Let me hit cancel, and I think it's because we are creating a project key rather than normal key. Let's go back into the API right here, and instead of project key, I'm going to view user keys, create a new secret key, create. I'm just going to copy that, come back in here, right here, and in this bearer, I'm just going to paste this in, just like this. Now I'm going to send a request and it generate. Now let's see what happens. Now we can see that this works successfully. We basically get everything we want. So right here, we come into content. This is what we actually want. It says this portfolio website appears to exhibit several key elements. It gives us everything we need, right? Now, what we just need to know is the exact value we want. So we want content. We need to know how this is structured. So under response, we have something called choices. Choices is under a dictionary. So we have choices, and choices as a list, and we're going to get the first value of that list, and we're going to get the message and the content. So let's do that. So right here, instead of just getting response, we're going to get the choices like this. We're going to get the first value of that list, the message dot content, just like this. And now we are basically giving all of this information to a variable called review response. So that works. But now what I want to do is, we could leave this as this, but I just want to copy this. Sorry, I want to select this, and rather than giving it the review response variable, I'm just going to switch that to answer, because I already have a variable created earlier that is called answer, and it doesn't really matter whatever we use. I just think answer makes more sense for this particular use case. Now the next thing that we're going to do is that once this is successful, we're just going to create a new block that basically returns that response. Remember that the response is all of this, the main content. And what that is going to do is that it's just going to show the answer variable. Remember, the value of answer variable is this content. So we're just going to drag this like this, and we're going to click on talk and text. Now in here, the value, we're just going to come in here and we're just going to type answer. Now we can run the whole thing. The first thing we need to do is to click on run, so it just kind of saves this whole change. And we're going to come back in here, and I'm just going to start from this intent. Now let's see what it does. So right here, it should start. So it couldn't undo this step just because we didn't give it a last utterance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in here. Now right here, we're going to click on this, and instead of last utterance, we're going to replace this with the actual image link. So I'm going to scroll up. Remember this link? I'm going to copy it, highlight that, and paste. So now that we have that done, let's just run this once again and go back. Now I could come here and just run this whole intent, and this should work perfectly fine. Now let's give that a second and let's see what it does. So as you can see right here, this works perfectly fine. If I scroll all the way to the top, it says, gives us the whole portfolio review, and it says positive aspects about the portfolio website. It says everything, and areas for improvement. It says everything right here, and it just gives us like a summary. So this is good. Everything works successfully. Now we can go back, and we have this whole flow that does what we want. Takes the image, gives us the response, or gives us the review. Good. Now what we need to do is to implement this into our Django project right here, right? But before we do that, let me come back here, and we shouldn't forget to change this back to last utterance. I'm gonna come highlight this URL just so we don't make that mistake. Last utterance. Good. So now that we have this, what we can do next is implement it in our application, in our Django application. So what I want to do is to use the intent API. So if I come in here, they have an interact API. So this is just the Voiceflow developers documentation. There's also going to be a link to this in the description below. So what we want to focus on, I'm just going to zoom in a bit. If we come here to this right corner and come onto intent, so right here, we want to focus on this. So this intent basically allows us to send a request to an intent, to a particular intent, and get a response. So this is how we do it, but I'm going to walk you through all the steps in our code. So now we're going to come in here, and what I want to do is to actually just create a new function. So right here, I'm just going to create a new function. I'm going to call this get review, because this is the actual function that gets the review, and it's going to take a screenshot URL. And another thing it's going to take is, so if I come in here, so right here, you're going to see that it's going to send a request to this particular URL. So and let me change this from Curl to Python. So if I change this, Python should be available. Okay, now I'm going to come here to change it, Python. And right here, you can see that we have this URL. So I'm just going to copy most of it from here. URL. Let's paste that in. Let's make sure we have requests imported, because we're going to need that. And now we're going to come down in here, and after the URL, I'm going to swipe back, and I'm just going to copy this old payload right here. We're going to copy headers, and we're going to copy response. Now I'm just going to paste everything right here, and we're going to change what needs to be changed. So right here we have payload, and let's make sure that this has the right indentations. This should be like this. Good. So what we need to change is the name and the query. First of all, this is the intent. We need to change the name of this particular intent. So right here, this name should be, if I come back in here, should be this name, which is review underscore intent. You can just click on it. We could have copied it, but we can't, so we're just going to write it manually. Review underscore intent. Let's make sure that is correct. Good. The next thing is the query. Now this query is going to be equals to the last utterance right here, which is whatever the user gives or passes as a value. So instead of writing I want a large pepperoni pizza, we're just going to give it the screenshot URL. So let me come back here. Screenshot URL as the query. So now that is the last utterance, which is good. Now for entities, we don't really need this. This could be blank, a blank list. Confidence, we don't need that. Like this. So this is good. For config, we could leave all of this just as it is, and the state we could also leave this as it is. But one thing is the headers. So we have the accept content type, but we don't have authorization. So let me show you how to get this. So authorization is basically the API key on Voiceflow. So we need to say authorization, and now we need to get the API key. Let's make sure there's a comma here. And to get this, we're going to have to come back to Voiceflow, come into integrations right here in this integration tab, click on API keys, and just click on copy API. We could come back and paste that in. Good. Once again, don't try to use my API because it's going to be disabled by the time this video is out. Now we could get the response, which is request.post URL. So we're loading this payload as the JSON, which is basically all of this. Good. And then the headers as the headers, which is all of this. Now let's just print response.text. Just like this. And let's see what happens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test this again. So right here, just the way I tested the text screenshot, I'm going to test it. This time I'm going to give it the, actually not this time around, I'm going to give it the actual link, the actual image link. So right here we have that. Good. And we don't need this. Let's just comment this out. Now let's save this, and if I come back in here, since we are printing this response, we should see that response right here in the terminal. Let's come in here, go back to AI review, refresh. So that is going to do its thing. It's done very quick. If I bring this terminal up and scroll down, you can see that that worked successfully. So if I come in here, as you can see, so if I come here, that worked, but the text it gave us was, sorry, I didn't get that. But this is not what we want. We want it to give us the actual text. So we're going to come back in here and check to see if everything is working. So let's just print this old response right here. Save that. And let's also make sure this is correct and the rest is correct. So let's just see. So we get user ID. Okay, so for the user ID, let's give it something like test user, because this user ID we need to change that. And let's see, let's make sure all of this is correct. Intent, screenshot URL, and the name is review intent. So let's make sure this is correct. If I come back in here into designer, so that is correct, and the entities is also correct. And if we come down here, config, all of this is correct. And for the state right here, we have the variables xvar as 1, and for the headers, let's make sure this is right. Good. So now that we know all of this is correct, let's save that and run that again. So let's give that a second to do its thing, and let's make sure all of that works successfully. So that should just take about a few seconds. Let's see what it does. So now that it's taking more than just 2 seconds, it should work. Okay, now let's come back in here. So good, response 200, but now, oh, we just printed only response. So let's say the text. Let's do that again. That's also going to take a while again. So now, as you can see, this page has been reloaded successfully. Then that means if we come in here and scroll up, right here, you can see that we have the actual response. So we don't just have response 200 or telling us the status of the response. We have the actual value. As you can see right here, it's in like a dictionary format. And what we now need to do, so if I come here into text, you see that this is the actual review. So this is a review of a portfolio website as visible in the provided screenshot. You know, it gives us the whole review. And what I like is it formats it well. So all this /n, this basically means go to a new line. It's basically creating new lines and new paragraphs, which is quite good. But now the next thing we want to do is to get this actual text. This is what we want to get. We don't want to show all of this to the user. They don't really need this. They just need this actual text review. So now what we need to do, I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to actually paste in a block of code, and I'm going to explain exactly what that does. So I'm just pasting in the block of code so we can save time rather than typing out everything. But before I do that, let's first turn this response into like a JSON format. So let me make sure that is 1 equals response.json. Good. And the next thing I'm going to do is to first create a new variable, a blank variable. And I'm just going to say review text. So when we get that text, we're going to append it to this later. Now, this is the text I'm going to copy in here. So it's a for loop, and it's basically looping through all this particular JSON format. So it says for item in data, what it's checking is if item type equals text. So it's saying, if I come in here, so for item in data, item is every single item in this list. So this is the first item, which is this dictionary. This is the second item, which is another dictionary. So it's saying if an item has a key of type, so as you can see right here, it has a key type, and the value is text, and the value is text, and payload is in item, payload is in item, and slate is in item, slate is in item. If we come here and scroll, and content is also an item. If you come here, you can see content. And that's basically what this is checking. It's just checking to see if we actually got the dictionary that has the text we need. So if that is true, then what we're going to do is that particular item, go into payload and go into slate. So it's going to go into payload, into slate. Then it's going to go into content, which is content. Then it's going to get the first value of that list, which is this. And then it's going to go into children, which is this. And the value of that children is a list, right? And the first value of that list is the dictionary that has the text, right? The text that we need. So it's going to go into that first value of the list and get the value of the text right here. Now, I hope that makes sense. So now once it gets that value, it stores it in this variable called review text. And what we're just going to do is to, so if I come in here, so what this is just doing is updating this initial variable right here. So I could just return review text. But first, let me just comment this out. Let me quickly explain why we created this variable instead of just creating it here. So the problem is, because we are going to return this review text as the response of this whole function, if that particular variable is only defined under a conditional statement, then that means if this statement is false, we don't have this variable, then this variable doesn't exist. So if the statement is false and the variable doesn't exist, it's going to still come here and try to return that variable. Then it's going to give us an error. So that is why we first initialize it right here. We define it with a blank value. So even if this doesn't go through, it's just going to return a blank response. Now, I hope that makes sense. Now, let's hit refresh. I'm just going to save this. I'm going to come back in here and hit refresh to refresh that page. And if we come into index, so we're using this get review function, which is this, and we're passing it with the screenshot. And now what you should do is, no, actually we should print review text, not response.text. So let me come here and change that. So we should print review text, save this, and it says it can't connect to the server. What I'm going to do, and I'm pretty sure that is because there is an error. So if I come down here, let's see why. Okay, now we should be able to connect to the server. So let's open this page once again. So that should take a couple of seconds to load up, and let's just check to make sure everything is good. So we loop through the old data that we converted into a JSON format, and then we check to see if the dictionary that stores the actual text is present by going through a couple of conditionals or a couple of conditions, and then we're storing it in this review text variable, which we initialized here, and then we're just breaking through that for loop. Then we're just going to return this review text. But before we return it, let's make sure everything works by printing it out right here in our terminal. So this page reloaded successfully. If we come back in here, good. So I'm just going to scroll all the way to the top. Let me actually drag this. Very good. Now you can see that it prints out just the text. This portfolio is displayed in the image, seems well structured with a clear purpose and attention to detail. So this is quite good. It gives us a good aspect, you know, give us the area for improvement. It gives us everything we need, and also a summary. So this is nice. This is exactly what we wanted. Now it returns just the text. So now what I can do is comment this out and remove this comment, and I'm just gonna cut this and put it here instead. So now once a user calls this get review function and provides the screenshot URL, they are gonna get the review of that particular URL as a response. Good, and this is what we want. Now that we have successfully created this AI agent that takes in the URL of the screenshot of the portfolio website and then gives out the feedback for that particular portfolio website, the next thing that we're going to do is to now make this work in our application. So everything we've done right now is just doing all the bits needed. So we've done, if I come back in here, we've done, look, we have the function that takes in the URL of the portfolio and takes a screenshot and then uploads that screenshot onto Cloudinary and then gives us a URL. We also have the part that takes in that screenshot URL and then analyzes it and gives us a feedback. So we've done all the bits needed, but now what we want to do is to combine everything and make it appealable to the user. So right here, okay, it can't connect, but we're going to make sure that is working. So right here in our website, what we have now is just a normal form, but what we want to do is we want a user to be able to go to that website, input the domain, and we want everything to work. So if I come back in here, I'm going to hit reload. But before I hit reload, let me make sure everything is running perfectly. So this is running perfectly. And before I reload that index page, let me just comment this out. So the reason why I'm commenting this out is to just make sure that this doesn't run whenever we reload that page. So now when I hit refresh, you can see this is the page. Now what we want to do is the domain. So whenever a user puts in the portfolio domain, we want everything to work. So if I come back in here, the first thing I'm going to do is to come into index.html. So we have this HTML file, and right here we have the script. So right here in this script, what we can do is we can first of all get whatever a user inputs. So if I come in here into form, you're going to see that this form is equivalent to this. So this form that you see right here where the user can input their portfolio and click on review, this is the code that does that. So what we're going to do with JavaScript is we're going to get whatever the user inputs, and then we're going to send those values to our backend. And because we already have the function that does all the major stuffs, we're just going to query those functions or call those functions. We're going to get the feedback, and then we're going to show it right here to our user. Now, there are various ways we can do this. We could have done this by just sending using the normal Django form, or maybe just a normal HTML form submission. The reason why I'm using JavaScript specifically is because I want all of this to be done without the page being reloaded. Now this is just for the UX of the website, so the user experience. I don't want the user to input a portfolio website, and when they click on review, it takes them to another page or the page start reloading. What I want is when a user puts in the link to their page and click on review, I want like a loading bar, so a cycle to start loading right here, and while everything is being processed, that cycle is going to keep loading, and when we have the feedback, that cycle is going to stop, it's going to disappear, and then we're going to show the user the feedback. So I want all of this to be done without the page being reloaded. Now what I'm going to do is to come back in here, and we need to make sure everything has ID. So this form has an ID, the input, which is the domain, has an ID, and it has a button that has a type of submit. Now let's go. So we're going to come into script, and right here the first thing we're going to do is to actually just use event listener. So we want to listen on this particular form, and when the user clicks on submit, we're going to stop the page from reloading, then we're going to do everything we want to do. So let's do that right now. So we're going to say document dot get element by ID, and the element we want to get is, if we come into this form, you can see that that form is review form. Now after that, we're going to add an event listener. So we're going to say dot add event listener. So what this does is it basically listens to an event, and an event in this case is if the button is clicked. So we're going to add an event listener to the submit button, right? And when that is clicked, this function is going to be run. So an event, give it event, open, like this, enter. So this is how you do that. Let's just give the spacing, just like this. And now what we can just do, just gonna have a tab, we can say event.prevent default. Now what this does is whatever happens when a user clicks on this submit button, the default thing that happens is going to be stopped, and in this case is the page to be reloaded. So that is going to stop, and what we're going to do now is to get the domain. So we want to get what the user actually input in here. So we're going to say, I'm going to save it in a variable called domain. So constant domain document, it should be equals to document dot get element by ID, and then we need to get the element by ID. We come into the form, this is the input, the ID is domain input. So we're going to come back in here, and then we're going to paste this in, and we're going to say dot value, just like this. So now whatever the user inputs in here, whatever domain the user inputs in here, we're going to have that saved in here, just like this. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check to make sure there is a domain. So say if no domain, so this is just checking if this is blank. Now if we're not able to get that value, let's just have a simple alert, and we'll just say, please enter your portfolio site domain, just like this. We're gonna have the semicolon because we're dealing with JavaScript, and we just say return like this. Now, after this if statement, what we want to do is when a user clicks on review, we want a cycle to be loading. Now, when I was creating this HTML template, right here, if you can see, I added this loader. There's a div tag that has a class and an ID called loader. So this basically just makes, it's like an animation that makes a cycle to keep loading, right? So it just makes a loading cycle. If I come into styling, so let's go into style, you can see .loader has everything. It has all the styles needed. It has the keyframes. It basically has the animation needed for this. And what we can see right here is display is none. So I put a comment here that says loader is hidden by default. Now the reason why we did this is because we don't want the user to just come to the website and already start seeing a loader or a loading cycle. So now what we want to do is when the user clicks on review, we want them to see that loading cycle. So it should keep loading just so the user knows that their request is being processed. And then when we have the feedback of that website, then that loader is going to disappear and we're going to see the feedback. I'm going to come back in here. And right here, what I'm just going to do is to make that loader show. So I'm going to say constant loader. I'm going to store it in this variable. Document.get element by ID, and that loader has an ID of loader. Let's confirm. So right here, loader semicolon. Now we're going to have another constant, and this is review results. So this is just where the result shows, the review result shows. So I have this div tag right here. It's hidden right now, but it's just the div tag where the result is going to be shown, right? So I'm just going to come in here. We also want to get that .get element by ID, review result. So we're not going to use this one right now. We're going to use it later when we actually get the result. Review result, just like this. Now what we want to do for now is to make that loader show. So we're going to say loader.style.display equals to block. Now this will make the loader display. Now if I save this and I come back in here, I'm just going to refresh this page. Let me just input something like tommy.com. If I just hit review, you're going to see now that we have a loader that is showing, right? Now this is just going to keep going for now because we haven't really done anything after that. So now what I want to do is I'm going to come in here, and now I want to submit the form. So when a user clicks on that submit button, I actually want to submit that form. But to where? Where is that form going? Now we're going to have, let me explain how this is going to work. So right here we have various functions. This function that takes a screenshot, function that gets the review. What we want to do is to have another function, right? So if I come in here, we're going to have submit underscore URL request. For now, let's pass. Now what this function is going to do is when a user in here, when a user submits that domain is going to be sent to this function right here. And then because we have that domain, we are then going to get the screenshot, upload that screenshot to Cloudinary, then send that screenshot to Voiceflow to do all the processing. And then we're going to get the review, and then we're going to pass it back right here to this JavaScript. So to this JavaScript code. That's what we're going to do. But for us to do this, we need to connect a URL to this particular view. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to create a new URL, copy paste, and I'm going to say submit -URL. I'm going to come into views, copy the name of that view. So views.submit URL, and let's give it the name of submit URL, just like this. Now that we've done this, we have this done. Before we actually get that data, let's first come in here and send that data to this particular URL, which is this view. So we're going to come in here now, and the next thing I'm going to do is to basically create a CSRF token. So we're going to use a CSRF token for this, And the reason why we're going to use a CSRF token is because this is going to be sent using a post method. So in Django, whenever you're sending something using a post method, you need to have a CSRF token. So I'm going to say const CSRF token equals document dot query selector meta name equals CSRF hyphen token, just like this. And then we're going to say dot get attribute content, just like this. Make sure we have the semicolon. Now this is going to get the value of the CSRF token, right? And we're going to send this with the data. Now we're going to use fetch, and we're submitting this to submit URL basically. And now let's just press enter. And in here, we're going to say the method, as I said, we're using a post method. So post should just be comma, and then headers content type hyphen type application /JSON and X CSRF token, and then we're going to give this the value of CSRF token. I didn't really explain what CSRF token is. I just said why we use it. So we use it in Django whenever we are basically using a post method to submit a form. But why do we even use it? So first, CSRF token stands for cross-site request forgery. Now this is like an attack that hackers can use to get the data from a form or from a form being submitted on your website. But Django has this stuff called CSRF token that basically prevents that from happening, right? So you don't really need to know how this is done or how it prevents it from happening. You just need to know once you have this, once you specify the CSRF token, whenever you are using a post method to submit a form, that form should be secured. Now we're just going to press comma. And right here, we're going to have comma also. And now we need to specify the body. So body JSON the stringify and let's give the value of domain to be domain. Let's make sure you can see that. So you're just saying domain and giving the value domain. Right here, what we're going to do next is to say .then response. So this is when we get the response. It's going to be response.json, right? And then we're going to say .then data. Going to open curly braces, and we're going to leave this blank for now. And we're going to come back into this when we have actually gotten that data back. So let me just say, let me leave a comment saying do whatever yeah. So this is fine. And what we can do next is to say .catch. So if there's any error, .catch error. Let's open curly braces. And we're just going to say something like console dot error just like this. And then the next thing we're going to do is to say dot finally. Now what we want to do is, I'm going to come here, and what we want to do is to just, so when we've successfully submitted the form and then gotten back the response, what we want to do is to then remove the loader. So the loading circle, we want to remove that. So style.display should be equals to, so this should just be loader. So it should be equals to none, just like this. Then after this, I'm pretty sure what we need to do next is to then make the rating system. So like when a user can give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down to give a feedback to the review. That's what we want to do right here. But what I'm just going to do is to say rating section like this. So now I'm just going to give this semicolon and give this a semicolon. So this is actually done. We're done with this part. And what we need to do now is to go into the views, and then we're going to collect this data and send back a response. So right here in views.py file, we're going to write this particular submit URL function. The first thing we want to do is to make sure this function can only be accessed, or this view can only be accessed using a post request. To do this, we're going to come here and say we're going to use something called require HTTP methods. But before we can do that, we need to import it. So we're going to scroll all the way to the top, and right here we're going to say from Django.views.decorators.http import require HTTP methods. I'm going to come back to submit URL, and right here what I'm going to do is to just say require HTTP methods, and I'm going to specify the method I want in square brackets, which is post, just like this. And this is going to make sure if a user is trying to access this view or this URL using a get method, it's not going to work. Now what we need to do is, since we already know we are sending in some data here, right here we're submitting this particular form, what I'm going to do is to just say data equals JSON.loads. Now we also need to make sure that we have JSON imported, and for us to do this is actually quite easy. We just need to say import JSON, just like this. So you need to make sure you have JSON imported before you can use JSON in your code. Now the next thing we want to do is say requests.body. So this is going to get this body, which if we come back in here, if we remember, is this body, right? Now that is going to get it and store it in a JSON format. Now we're going to get the specific domain from that particular body. So say domain equals data.get domain, just like this, right? And now what we want to do, if I come in here, I'm going to say website underscore screenshot. It's going to be equals to, now I'm going to use this take screenshot function. I'm going to call it, and I'm going to say take screenshot, and I need to give it the URL, also known as a domain. And I'm going to come here like this, and I'm just going to say domain. Actually, no, since it's a variable, we need to give it the variable name without quotes. So now that is going to basically store, if we come back into take screenshots, because we are giving it, I'm just going to collapse this, we are giving it the URL, right? What is going to return to us is the URL of the uploaded screenshot, right? So that is good. So now that is stored in this variable called website screenshot. Hopefully that makes sense. We're going to do that again for the actual review. Website underscore review equals to, we're going to use the get review. So we're going to use the get review function. And this time around, we're going to have to give it the screenshot, the URL of the screenshot, which is this website screenshot right here. So hopefully this flow makes sense. So we first call this take screenshot by giving it the domain name, the domain name, and it's going to store the URL to the screenshot of that particular portfolio site in this variable called website screenshot. Then we're going to give that variable, we're going to give that URL to this particular get review function that is going to get the review of that screenshot, of the screenshot of that portfolio, right? And that is going to be stored in website review. If I come back in here, you're going to see that that is what this does. This uses Voiceflow to get everything we need, and then it's just going to return the review text. Good. Now if I come back in here, what I want to do now is I'm just going to say response underscore data should be equals to website screenshot Then I'm going to give it this value of website screenshot. We just want to also pass in the URL, and then we're going to say website review. I'm going to give it this value of website review also, right? And this is giving us an error, so this is because we need to have a colon here, right? And now then what I'm going to do is to just return, so I'm going to return a JSON response. So return JSON response, and we need to make sure we are importing JSON response. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the top, and I'm going to say from Django.http import JSON response, just like this. Now we can come back in here and use JSON response, and what we can just return is the actual response data. So we're just going to come in here and say response data. Now hopefully this makes sense, right? This is literally all we need to do for now. We can now come in here, since we are returning that response data, we can now come into index, and right here in index we can now showcase that data right here. Remember right here where we said do whatever, we can now showcase that here. So what we want to do now is actually, so let me quickly explain what we are going to do. So right here what we're going to do is that we are going to, under here, if I come into this div tag, remember I said this is where the review result is going to be stored. So I just created a div tag that is blank, and what we're going to do is we're going to append to this div tag. So we're going to like write some code onto this div tag, right? And that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to make sure that it's no more hidden. So we're going to remove this class that says hidden. We're going to make sure it's no more hidden. So we're using Tailwind. That's why once we just say class hidden, it automatically just hides that tag. So that's why we didn't really have to specify the styling ourselves or configure the styling. So here where we say then, we have to come here and now append. So we'll first get the data, the website screenshot, and then the website feedback, the portfolio feedback, and then we're going to append it here. You're going to see what I mean in a second. So right here, what we're going to do is, since we already have this particular, right here, this review result, we already have it stored as a variable right here called review result. So what we're going to do is right here where we say do whatever, just going to press tab, just tab it again. I'm going to say review result dot inner HTML. So dot inner HTML, I want to edit the HTML. And what I'm going to do now is to have this right here. So I'm going to open and close this just like this, right? And in here, I'm going to have a div tag. So I'm just going to paste a block of HTML code, and I'm going to explain what they do. So right here, what this is doing is all of this HTML code is just going to chip it or put it inside this div tag. So it's going to be in here like this. And what this is just doing is we have this div tag that has some styling just to make sure. So right here, we're going to have the screenshot on one side, and then we're going to have the feedback on one side. So the feedback is going to come first, then the screenshot is going to be here. So all of this styling, that's just what it does. It makes sure all of that is possible. So that's what this first div tag is doing. Then the second div tag, this is just showing the portfolio feedback. So as you can see, we have this div tag, then we have h3 saying portfolio feedback, and then we have a text area that is read only, so a user cannot edit anything from there. And if I keep scrolling, this is all the styling it uses, but then the value is, so the $, curly braces, and we say data.website review. Remember that data, if I come back in here, is the response, right? And then .website review, if we come into views, website review is the actual feedback. So that is what that does, and we end the text area. If I scroll back, we end that div tag. So this is for the feedback, and now this is to showcase the screenshot. So we want to show the user the screenshot of that portfolio website, so they will know that we got their website right. So if I come in here, similarly we have another div tag, and in there we have one more div tag, and right here we have an h3 tag that says screenshot. So all of this styling is just using Tailwind CSS, you know, and because this video we're mainly focusing on the processing, the backend, how it works, so I don't want to write all of this from scratch in this video to save time. So all of this styling just makes sure this looks nice. It makes sure that the screenshot is at the right side, the text, which is the feedback, is at the left side, and all of that. And we have an image. So this image tag, we have the src, which is the source, and that is data.website screenshot. If you remember, website screenshot is this right here, which is the screenshot from Cloudinary. If I come back in here, we just have alt website screenshot, and then we have all of the styling and the classes required. Now, when I save this, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this is not hidden anymore. So this particular review results, it has a class called hidden, which makes it not visible. So what I'm going to do is to remove that and make sure that it is visible. So right here, I'm just going to come here. Let me just put this here. I have a colon, a semicolon actually, and I'm just going to say review result dot class list dot remove hidden, just like this, right? So this is what we need, and I'm going to save this. Now this should work. Everything should work successfully to this point. Let's try this out. So I'm just gonna, right here, this is still loading because remember earlier we didn't do anything to make it stop loading. So I'm gonna save this, and remember the portfolio website I was gonna use. I'm just gonna bring anyone, and I'm gonna paste that in there just like this. So we're gonna give that a second to just go through all the processing and do what we need. So as you can see right here, this loaded up successfully. Everything works fine. We have the portfolio feedback. So as you can see, it gives us a very detailed feedback. The portfolio website displays a clear and professional design with a focus on front-end React development. Here's a detailed review. It gives us the positive aspects, aesthetic appeal, structured layout, personalization, everything. It gives us the areas for improvement. And as you can see, which is quite a lot, which is good. And then it gives us a summary. And if you come to the right hand side, you can see that we have a screenshot of this particular website. So as you can see, a full screenshot. I could scroll down. It's going to give us a full screenshot of that website. So this is good. It's quite good, very handy. And we have everything done up to this point. Now we have successfully built out the most part of this website. The last thing we need to do is to allow a user to review this feedback. So we want them to give us a response on what they think and how they think the feedback was. So we're going to have a thumbs up and thumbs down button right here. And if a user clicks on the thumbs up button, that means they think the feedback was quite helpful. But if they click on the thumbs down button, then they think the feedback was quite poor and they don't really like it. So we're going to be saving all this information onto our database. And let's say you want to even take this project further by building out your own AI model just for this. Then you can train that AI model on all this information that we're saving in the database. So the feedback that users think is good or the feedback that users think is nice. So this is just one use case for this. But for now, let's just save the feedback and also the user's feedback. So we're going to come in here. And what I'm going to do actually is to just swipe this like this. So it's going to be easier. And we're going to come into the code. And remember right here where we add this loader style.display. Remember I said we're going to come in here and this is where we're going to take care of the rating section. So if we come to this part, you're going to see that we have this div tag that says rating section, right? So the first thing I'm going to do, so if I come here, you can see that display is none. I'm going to make display block just like this. And I'm going to come back to this page. Let me just open it in a new tab. So this is it, rate the feedback. This is how it looks like. And let me show you where we get this great and poor from. So I made sure to add it as a comment. I'm going to copy this, open a new tab and paste. And right here, you can see that this is, so we're getting it from Font Awesome. That's where we get this particular thumbs up button from. And we're using the SVG version. So if you come in here, you're going to see that we use SVG and not just the I tag. So if you come to SVG, this is what we use. You could just copy it. And I'm also going to come here again and copy the link for the thumbs down. Once again, the whole code is going to be available in the description below. So don't worry about that. So this is for the thumbs down. So I can just quit this. Now this is the code right here for the feedback. So all of this right here, this is the code for this. And when a user clicks on great or poor, we want a button, or we want a text to say thanks for reviewing, right? Or thanks for rating. And that is what this div tag does right here. Now, what we're going to do is when a user, this should only show after a user has submitted a domain and they have seen a feedback. That's the only time this should be shown. And when a user clicks on great or poor, then we want to update that particular, so we want to update that particular feedback model in the database. Right now, we are just showing a user the screenshot and all of that and the feedback, but we're not actually saving all of this information into our database. So we need to do that. So what we're going to do right now is, the first thing I'm going to do is to come into views before I even do anything. And right here in views, you're going to see where we have this submit URL. So in this submit URL, I come right here, you're going to see that we're just getting the information, we're not saving it into the database. Earlier in this tutorial, remember we created this model for the review, and we had all the information, the ID, the site URL, the site image URL, the feedback, and the user rating. Remember this. Now we're going to come in here, and we're going to do that. So what we want to do is to first say from .models import review, right? I'm going to come in here, and what I need to do is, once we get the website screenshot and website review, I want to create a new review object, and I'm going to say that is going to be equals to review dot objects dot create, and we're going to give, come here, what we need is site URL. We don't need to specify the ID, is a primary key, is automatically gonna be added. Site URL is gonna be equals to domain, which is this. The next thing is the site image URL, which is the screenshot, so the website screenshot, like this. And the next thing is the feedback, just like this, which is going to be equals to the website review, just like this, right? Now this is what we need, and I'm just going to save this. Now, once we get all of this information, a new model is going to be created, a new object is going to be created and saved into our database. But what we want to do now is we want a user to be able to update that model when they like or dislike a particular feedback. For us to do this, we're going to say review underscore ID is going to be equals to new review object dot ID, right? And then we're going to send this as a response. So we're going to say review underscore ID. The value is going to be review ID, just like this. Now, once we send this ID, in the script, we now have the ID of that particular model, of that particular object. So when a user clicks on great, we're going to update that particular object, and we're going to give it a rating of great. But now we can do that because we have the ID of that object. I hope that makes sense. So now the next thing we're going to do is to actually come into, so right here in index, I'm going to scroll to this part. So the part for the rating. Now let's just look at what this entails. So right now we have the display. Let's just change that back to none. And if we come in here, what we want to do is when a user clicks on this particular SVG, which is this right here, we want to do something, right? So for us to do this, we can do two things. So we can, or actually the best way to do this is just to give it an onClick attribute right here. So we can just say onClick. Let's say something like great function. So what this is doing is, this is the button for thumbs up, and thumbs up represent great. That means the user thinks this feedback was great. So once this div tag is clicked, which is this SVG, which is this, once this is clicked, then we're going to call the great function in our JavaScript file. Now let's do the exact same thing for the thumbs down. So we're going to come right here to where we have poor, we have the SVG also, and in this div tag, we're just going to say onClick, but then we're going to change great to poor. So I hope that makes sense. So when a user tries to click on either of the button, it's going to go to the respective functions. So this is for great right here, and then this is for poor right here. So this is exactly what we want to do. Now the next thing that we're going to do is to now go and actually define those functions. So we're going to scroll down back into the script. We're going to leave this, actually we're not going to leave this blank. So after displaying none, right, after making the loader disappear, the next thing we want to do is to make this rating section appear. So what we're going to do to do that is const. So we need to get the rating section. It's going to be equals to document dot get element by ID, and let's check the ID for that. If I scroll up here, so this ID is rating section, just like this. We need to add our semicolon, and now we're just gonna do the exact same code we did here by saying rating section dot style dot display, but this time around is going to be equals to block, just like this, and we can save that. So now that we have that done, once we input review, because right now there's nothing showing, but once we input something and review, and we actually get the feedback and everything we need, the loading cycle is going to disappear and the rating section is going to pop up. This is good. This is what we want. Now what we need to do is to go create a URL and a view that actually takes this input. So when a user clicks on the thumbs up or the thumbs down, just the way we did for this form where we submitted something to the backend, we want to do the same for this. Now we're going to come in here and I'm just going to copy paste that. I'm going to say feedback, just like this. I'm going to copy this and paste here, copy and paste. I'm going to come into views, and right here I'm going to have a function called feedback. Let's allow it to take a request, and for now let's pass. Now I can save this and save this. Now what this is going to do is that it's basically going to make sure that only a user that is trying to request for this page using a post method is allowed to access this page. And secondly, it's going to take the review ID, right, and it's going to take the review data. So is it a great review or is it a poor review, and then it's going to update that particular object. So what we need to do, we're going to come here into index. So right here in index, we're going to create functions, new functions, and we're going to create first this great function. So I'm going to come in here and see what exactly we did. So this great function, we're going to come here, and right at the end of this, we're going to create a new function, just like this. Say great function. I'm going to end that just like that. And in there, what we're actually going to do is to once again get CSRF token. This is because we're using a post method. So we're going to get CSRF token. I'm going to come here and just paste in that CSRF token. And we're going to use a fetch once again. And right here we have this fetch. So it opens here and it closes here. So we're going to get this. Come in here. Paste that. But instead of submit URL, we want this to be /feedback, just like this. And this is going to remain the same, but right here in body, what we want to do is we want to get the ID. This is going to be review ID. So what this is where we need to do something, because we need to get the ID for the object of that particular review, right, or that particular review model. Well, how do we actually get this ID? So what we need to do is to come up here all the way to the top of the script, and let's create a new variable and say review underscore ID, and let's leave this blank just like this. Now what we do is when we've gotten that ID, remember in views, we passed in the review ID for that model for that object after we've created that object. But now what we can do is we can now get that, submit that ID or update this. So right here, we're going to update this review ID variable. So right here, after we've gotten the data, what we're going to do is to come in here and just say review ID. So right here, we're going to say review ID equals to data dot review ID, just like this. So now we have the ID for this specific object. We can now use that there. So we want to pass in the ID, and this is going to be review ID. Good. And the next thing that we want to pass is the type. So if a user clicks on this grade function, that means the type of response or the type of feedback or the type of rating that the user is rating this particular response is great. So we're going to say type great, just like this, right? And then right here, just after this, we're going to say then. I'm actually just going to copy this as the same thing. So we're going to say then all of this, come in here just like this, and then we're going to say then data curly braces. Now what we're going to do is to say const. So right here, remember I said we have a success text. So if we come here, so once a user has successfully rated it, we want to show this text that says thanks for rating. We want to show it. So right now it has an ID of success text and the display is none. So what we're going to do is to make the display block. So const success text document dot get element by ID success underscore text. And now what we're going to do is to just make that block. Success text dot style dot display equals block. Now just like this. Now what we're then going to do is to say dot catch error, and then we're just going to say console dot error. So this should be console dot error. Just going to print out the error and say error, just like this, and add the semicolon. Now this is going to take care of this great function, and we're actually going to do the same thing with the poor function. So I'm just going to copy this O function right here. I'm going to paste it. We're going to do exactly the same thing. The only difference here is that the type is going to be poor. And remember, this type we specified it here, great and poor, in the choices for the user rating field in this review model. So now this should be done successfully. And what I'm going to do now is to come into views, and right here in feedback, what we need to get is the data. So similarly to what we did here, we're going to copy this. I'm just going to paste it above it, and I'm going to say data equals to JSON.loads request.body, just like this. And remember, this request.body is this particular body right here. Now what we need is the review ID, review underscore ID, which will be equals to data.get, and let's see what we named it. We named the ID. So data.get ID. Let's copy this, and this should be review type, and we name this type, just like this. Now we're going to try except. So let me say pass. Actually, let's just keep going. So let's say review will be equals to review dot objects dot get id equals review underscore id. So we are trying to get the object in which has this id, right? Which has the id that we passed in here. Once we get that object, we're going to say review dot user rating, which is this, because as default the user rating is going to be blank. That's the default, it's going to be none. But now we're going to update that user rating to type, which is this, and then we're going to say review dot save, like this. Now what we're just going to do is to return JSON response. I'm going to return status. I'm just going to say success. That's if this is successful. And then let's give it like a message. I'm just going to say feedback submitted. And now we're going to say accept. So if this doesn't work, but let's say review, let's give a specific accept. So let's say review does not exist. Now this is if it tries to get the review object that has the specific ID. If it doesn't exist, then we're just gonna return with like an error message. So let me Control Z, let me copy this and paste this. So status, let's say error, and then message should be review not found. Now let's save this. Now everything should be working successfully. Let me just do this. All of this should be working fine. I'm gonna save this, and now let's test this out right here. So let me just refresh this page, and now that the page has been refreshed, what I'm just gonna do is to paste in the URL for the domain. I'm gonna hit review, and now let's give that a few seconds to load up. So as you can see right here, this has loaded up successfully. We have the full review or the full feedback right here. And we also have the full screenshot. And right here we have great and poor. So we have the rating section also showing. Now, let me first come in here to see if this has actually been saved in our database. I'm going to come in here, and right here in SQLite, I'm going to click on it. And I'm just going to first hit on refresh just to make sure everything is loaded. And I'm going to go into this review. Now I'm going to come here. I can see that we have one new object in this model. So we have one new value. So right here we have the ID, the site URL, the image URL, the full feedback, right? And then the user rating. So right now we can see user rating is null, which means it's none. So if a user doesn't want to rate, they could just go away or try to search for another website. But let's say a user tries to rate. So let's say they click on great. Just going to click on that, and let's see if that works. So we click on great. Let's come in here now and hit refresh. So it saves us as poor. Let me click on poor and hit refresh. That is also poor. Let me click on great. It doesn't update. So we know there is a problem in the HTML. So if I come in here, so right here we have, so the problem is we have two great functions, right? We're meant to change this to poor, just like this. And then this is meant to have the type of great, and this is meant to have the type poor. So this should take care of our error. Now we're going to hit refresh. And I'm just going to put in that same URL and hit review. And we're going to give this a second to review. So as you can see right here, this shows again, we have brand new feedbacks, we have screenshots. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to open this up. I'm going to hit refresh. Right here now, we have another object in here, right? And as you can see, every single time also it gives us different reviews. So if I open this up, if I come into feedback, if I try to get all the values, this is one, and I'm just gonna close this up. So I'm gonna close this, open this up. As you can see, this has different review. So it's like unique review every single time, which is quite good. But now what we want to do is right here we can see that it is null. Let me click on great. So if I'm rating this great, I'm going to come here and hit refresh. You can see that the user rating has been updated to great. Also, if I rate it poor and hit refresh, you can see that the user rating has been updated to poor. So that works successfully. Now, the only problem is that once we try to rate this, it doesn't show any text telling us that you successfully rated or thank you for rating. This is because if we come in here, there is a typographical error. So this is trying to get the element by ID, and the ID says success text. I'm going to copy this. If I come in here, let's make sure that it's copied. If I come into that actual text, that actual div tag, you can see that the ID is success text, but this only has one C. We're just going to paste that to make sure there's no typographical error. Now, if I come back in here, and I'm just going to copy this again, and I hit refresh on this, and I try to do this and hit review. Let's see what happens. Now we have the results, the full result. And if I click on great, you can now see that it says thanks for rating. Once again, if I come back into my database and hit refresh, you can see that this updated successfully. So we successfully built out this website. We've come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed and understood everything that we did in this video. Once again, the link to everything that we used will be in the description below. So if you like this, don't forget to click on the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.